Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're opening up a file on someone pretty complex, a character who's, well, more than just a villain. He's become this huge psychological case study, the Joker. And our mission for you, the learner, is really to get past the usual comic book stuff, you know? We want to understand why this figure of chaos sticks around, why he resonates. We're looking at sources that view his fractured mind as this portrait of alienation and how suffering, if it's ignored, can twist into something really dangerous.
Yeah, and it's important we approach this seriously. The research we've pulled together suggests that Joker's terror isn't random. It comes from this deep feeling of being invisible, dismissed. He's not after money, usually.
Right.
He's seeking recognition in a way, and violence becomes his ultimate, really twisted way of forcing the world to finally look at him.
Okay, let's jump right in then, starting with maybe his most defining non-feature. He has no single past. Almost every other major character, you know their story. But Joker, constant conflicting origins, what does that uncertainty tell us?
Well, the ambiguity itself is, according to a lot of the psychological analysis of the comics, the whole point. It's central.
Yeah.
Think about those famous examples that the research highlights. You've got the Killing Joke, where there's that very specific tragedy, right? The failed comedian, his pregnant wife dies tragically. This one bad day that supposedly pushes him over the edge. It's a neat, almost tidy story of descent into madness.
But then you compare that to something like the Dark Knight film, where he gives those chillingly different stories about his scars. Was it his abusive father? Or, did he do it himself?
Exactly. You have a character who just can't or maybe won't land on one identity.
Right.
And the sources argue this lack of a stable past is really similar to severe psychological dissociation. You see this sometimes in real trauma survivors.
Okay.
His memory seems broken. His sense of self is always shifting depending on the moment. It means he's kind of living in this state of permanent psychological fragmentation. He can be anyone, which in a way means he's no one specific at all.
And that fragmentation presumably has roots somewhere. Which brings us to this next idea, trauma inverted. The material we looked at keeps pointing back, whatever the origin story, to this deep feeling of being powerless initially. Alienation, humiliation, being forgotten. So how does that feeling, being small and forgotten, turn into the kind of, the scale of chaos we see? That's a huge jump from feeling humiliated to wanting to, break the world.
That's where this idea of inversion comes in. It's a really critical mechanism to understand. Trauma often leaves a person feeling completely helpless, right?
Yeah.
The Joker's whole method seems to be about flipping that completely.
Yeah.
If he felt powerless back then, now he's the one who wields absolute power, usually through sadistic control and terror. You could really see this calculated sadism, especially in interpretations like The Dark Knight. His actions aren't just random violence. They feel like these twisted social experiments, designed to prove that everyone else is just as broken, just as capable of chaos as he is. He doesn't just want to cause pain. He wants to force people to break their own rules.
Like the fairy scene, that's a perfect example. Making ordinary people choose who lives or dies. It's like he's proving his point about inherent cruelty. That's total control, but it looks like chaos.
Precisely. He takes his own suffering and turns it into a tool for control. Instead of being afraid of life's randomness, the absurdity that maybe broke him or scarred him, he dives right into it. He becomes that absurdity and wields it like a weapon. He's not just cruel, he sort of embodies cruelty itself. And that's the core idea in the sources. His trauma is relentlessly aimed outward, back at a world he thinks laughed at him first.
So the laughter then, it's not joy at all, it's the kind of shield.
It's the ultimate defiance, isn't it? By laughing constantly at the horror, including the horror he creates, he's denying that it has any real power over him, or maybe denying the original trauma that made him. He's essentially laughing in the face of the universe, almost like saying, you tried to break me. Well, I broke everything else first.
Okay, moving past the philosophical angle for a moment. If we try to put a more formal psychological lens on him, what clinical possibilities do the sources talk about? I mean, we're looking at extremely disruptive, harmful behavior here.
Well, when you synthesize the research, a few clinical pictures seem to fit parts of his behavior quite well. The one that comes up most often is antisocial personality disorder, or APD,
Okay.
which involves, this pervasive pattern of just completely disregarding others' rights, lack of empathy, manipulation, the sadism we talked about, and basically zero respect for human life or laws. And alongside that, the sources often point to strong narcissistic traits, that grandiose sense of self, seeing himself as this vital agent of chaos, somehow above mere morality. plus that constant craving for attention, which he gets through these huge destructive acts.
What about the very physical side of his instability we sometimes see, particularly in more modern takes? The laughter itself often seems painful, uncontrollable.
Yeah, that brings us to something called pseudobulbar affect, or PBA. You see that depicted very clearly in the Joker 2019 movie. It's important for you, the learner, to know PBA isn't just acting crazy. It's a neurological condition.
Right.
It causes involuntary emotional outbursts, like uncontrollable laughter or crying, that often don't match what the person is actually feeling inside. And that adds this layer of deep, almost clinical tragedy. The very laughter that defines him might be something he literally can't stop, possibly linked to brain injury or severe trauma.
Wow. Okay. That definitely paints him as more tragic, maybe even physically compelled. But the source material throws in this really interesting curveball, doesn't it? It stops us from just saying, oh, he's ill and leaving it there. It suggests his madness might also be a deliberate choice. But wait, if the clinical side points to that level of damage, maybe even neurological stuff, doesn't it feel a bit, I don't know, maybe simplistic to say he's just choosing madness? How do the sources suggest we navigate that? Between like a trauma response and calculated evil?
That really is the million-dollar question, isn't it? It's the uncomfortable territory that best research dives into. The distinction they often try to make is between compulsion and calculation. Someone in a purely psychotic state might act without consistent logic. But the Joker, he's often shown as terrifyingly lucid.
Yeah, very methodical sometimes.
Exactly. Highly calculating, focused on specific, sometimes very long-term goals like trying to break Batman or corrupting all of Gotham. The sources propose he has a conscious philosophy, even if it's nihilistic. He seems to understand right and wrong. He just deliberately rejects it and chooses to be its opposite.
So he's weaponizing his own condition almost.
In a sense, yes. It's like he chose to make chaos his identity, his gospel, suggesting the madness is maybe both an unavoidable result of what happened to him and a kind of calculated, self-aware decision to punish the society he feels rejected him.
That duality, illness and choice, leads us straight to his other half, doesn't it? His nemesis. If Joker is shaped by trauma and rejecting order, what does that tell us about Batman? They feel like two sides of the same coin, starting from a similar place. Suffering.
They absolutely are the ultimate psychological mirror image. You hit it exactly. Both characters are fundamentally defined by trauma. For Bruce Wayne, it's seeing his parents murdered. For the Joker, it's, well, we don't know exactly, but it's clearly some devastating loss, humiliation, suffering. But look at their responses. Bruce Wayne reacts to that fear and loss with ironclad discipline. He builds these intense walls of morality, structure, self-control. The suit, the code, it's all a defense against the chaos that shattered his childhood.
Whereas Joker's trauma leads to the complete opposite. Total surrender to chaos. He doesn't build walls. He spends all his energy tearing down every single moral or social wall he finds.
Precisely. The Joker is living proof that suffering doesn't dictate one single path. It can create the ultimate symbol of order, like Batman or a Dale. It can create the ultimate agent of chaos. They need each other in a way to define what they are, what they're not. Their trauma responses are in constant dialogue.
So to kind of tie this all together, maybe we can quickly touch on some of the big examples the sources bring up. These specific case studies that really show these themes in action, the identity fragmentation, the trauma inversion.
Sure. The three big interpretations often analyzed give us a kind of arc. First, you have the killing joke, which really establishes that potent, simple idea of the one bad day, that single, fragile tipping point where trauma just overwhelms someone and breaks their identity.
Right, the origin story, even if it's just one possible origin. Then you get the Dark Knight's version.
And that interpretation shifts the focus, doesn't it? It's less about his internal suffering and more about him acting as this philosophical force against the world.
Yeah, testing society.
Exactly. He becomes the embodiment of chaos there, using really calculated terror not just to hurt people, but to expose what he sees as the hypocrisy and fear lurking beneath society's surface. Is that trauma turned fully outward, trying to force the world to face its own potential for madness.
And then finally, Joker 2019, which we touched on with the PBA.
Right. And that film offers maybe the starkest clinical portrait. It really puts untreated mental illness, social neglect, and that grinding humiliation of being invisible front and center. It shows how that external rejection acts like fuel, turning internal pain into explosive public violence. So the core lesson, really, when you pull from all these sources, is that trauma isn't static. It doesn't just happen and then you get over it. It changes things. It mutates. It can become the defining feature of a person. And that laughter, that incessant, maybe uncontrollable laughter, we have to understand, for the Joker, it's definitely not joy. It's presented as this complex armor against the sheer despair that's always threatening to swallow him whole.
Okay. We set out today to explore the Joker as a way to understand alienation and suffering. And you've definitely walked us through some really complex psychological ideas, trauma inversion, that line between illness and philosophy.
And the sources really do confirm why he sticks around in our culture.
Yeah.
He makes us confront something pretty uncomfortable, that when deep pain or rejection is just ignored or worse, mocked by society, that pain doesn't just go away. It can fester, change shape, and sometimes, yeah, it explodes outward as chaos that hurts everyone, not just the original victim.
So here's something maybe for you to think about after this deep dive. Considering that both paths, Batman's intense self-control and the Joker's complete surrender to chaos, seem to spring from the same root, from foundational suffering. What does that really imply about how thin that line between morality and madness might actually be? Something to definitely mull over.